Welcome back to this Wednesday edition of VU Sports Wired, Vanderbilt Video Productions' premier sports talk show. My name is Bobby Kent, and I am your host. I am joined by Jonah Barbin, a senior staff writer for the Vanderbilt Hustler. We will dive deep into football's loss at the hands of the Georgia Bulldogs, preview their matchup against the Missouri Tigers, as well as discuss Vanderbilt soccer's victory over number 24 South Carolina following a rough stretch for the team. First, we will start with football, where the Commodores looked overmatched against the number 1 ranked Georgia Bulldogs, losing 55-0. Vanderbilt is now 3-4 on the season, having lost their last 3 games since starting 3-1. On the bright side, however, this was the last game of 3 straight against AP top 10 opponents. Vanderbilt next faces the Missouri Tigers on Saturday in what could present the Commodores' best chance to win an SEC game. But before we dive into the games, let's first take a look at how Vanderbilt's loss to Georgia unfolded. The 3-3 Vanderbilt Commodores taking on the 6-0 number 1 ranked Georgia Bulldogs at Sanford Stadium in Athens on Saturday. Vanderbilt trying to upset the number 1 team in the country. The Bulldogs are the 3rd straight top 10 opponent Vanderbilt has faced this season. On the Bulldogs' first drive, quarterback Stetson Bennett hits Kenny McIntosh on a screen and he takes it in for the 11-yard score. Georgia up 7-0 early. On Vanderbilt's second possession, A.J. Swan took the shotgun snap, looked to his left, and fired a ball to Shepard, but it goes just off his hands in what could have been a touchdown. He had room to run. Shepard, understandably upset with himself after the play, looking on the sideline. On the following Georgia possession, Kenny McIntosh strikes again, taking this handoff up the middle for 7 yards for the score. The Bulldogs would jump ahead to a 14-0 lead. Early in the second quarter, Bennett fakes the handoff, evades, and throws a touch pass to Dominic Blaylock, who adjusts to make the catch for a gain of 25 yards. Bulldogs on the goal line now. Dejon Edwards takes the carry into the end zone for 6. UGA up 21-0. Later in the quarter, another missed opportunity for Vanderbilt. A.J. Swan firing this pass to J.D. McGowan, who had gotten free in the seam, but it was a little too much on it, and he could not haul it in. Could have been a big play for the Doors. Following a McGowan fumble, Bennett finds Darnell Washington, who makes a ridiculous in-stride one-handed catch, another one of the highly talented tight ends Georgia has on its roster. Capping off a 10-play drive, Bennett looks right and finds Dominic Blaylock, who adjusts for the touchdown catch, 28-0, Georgia piling it on. Right before the half, Vanderbilt has a chance to put points on the board, but Joseph Bulvis cannot connect on this 44-yard attempt, still 28-0 at the half. Middle in the third quarter now, Vanderbilt gets the first of 2 highlight-worthy sacks, this one by way of Clemson transfer linebacker Kane Patterson. Same drive, same result. Bennett goes down to a slew of Vanderbilt defenders for the sack. The second Vanderbilt sack on the drive. Later in the game, backup QB Carson Beck in now for Georgia. Looks to his left and connects with Dylan Bell for the 24-yard slant touchdown, 41-0 Georgia. They would score 2 more times to win 55-0. Vanderbilt falls to number 1 ranked Georgia in Athens. Tough game all around for the Commodores, who will look to get their first SEC win Saturday against Missouri. So Jonah, it never really looked like Vanderbilt was in this game as the Bulldogs defense pitched a shutout and the offense scored 14-plus points in every quarter except the third. So what were your general impressions about this game?
Yeah, I mean, look, Bobby, you're in Athens. You're playing the number 1 team in the nation. We didn't really expect anything different. It was similar to a couple of weeks ago, losing 55-3 to Alabama in Tuscaloosa. I mean, those are the 2 hardest games you could have on a college schedule. And that's what Clark Lee and co. were given. Now, looking at that game, Clark Lee said yesterday in his press conference, to his credit, and you have to say this as a head coach, that it wasn't a burn-the-film game. It's never a burn-the-film game. There were things to take away. They had opportunities with the wheel route to McGowan. They had Shepard on that post route. There were opportunities to score in that game. They also had a fumble at the end of the first half that killed a lot of momentum, but it was never a game that you were going to win. And it wasn't even a game really where I'm looking for that many moral victories. We're just at the point where Georgia's outclassing us at this point, and that's okay. We will move forward. You know, if you're looking at things to improve on, the run game really never got going. And as this team's run game goes, really the team goes. So that's something I'm looking at in this game that could have changed the momentum just a little bit, but not really changed much.
To your point about the run game, Vanderbilt only had 45 yards of rushing on the rushing attack versus UGA had 192 yards. And in the passing game, they didn't do anything spectacular because they really couldn't against their defensive backs. They only had 105 yards passing, but Swan did not turn it over either. Swan is one of 2 quarterbacks in the nation to not have an interception this season. So he's been taking care of the ball. But he also didn't have any passing touchdowns either. Vanderbilt was 5 of 13 on third down. Georgia was 8 of 13. Georgia had a fourth down conversion. Vanderbilt did not, although it was late in the game when they were trying to just play to get reps. But this was a game where it didn't very well for the Commodores. But like you said, I don't know what else you would expect.
Yeah, and I mean, look, credit to A.J. Swan. Like you said, he didn't turn the ball over in the form of an interception, and that's a really positive thing. Remember, A.J. Swan has not been at the helm of this team for this long, and to go from being a high school quarterback to a backup on the Vanderbilt Commodores to playing Alabama and Georgia in Tuscaloosa and Athens, probably the two most hostile environments in college football. We can talk about Knoxville, Tennessee, too, and we'll talk about that coming up. It's really a credit to what Clark Lee is building, the culture he's building, and this young man that A.J. Swan is becoming. So the first step to having a great quarterback is having that poise, and then the team will build around him, Bobby.
Definitely, I agree. It gives Vanderbilt fans definitely something to look forward to, right? And be excited about as the season goes forward and as the years go forward. So let's talk about the stretch the Commodores have had in general in these last 3 games, right? Never before have they faced 3 top 10 FBS opponents in 3 straight games. So what does a run like this sort of teach a young team?
Yeah, look, it was a stretch that we knew was going to be 0-3. There were really no any ways about it. We knew going into Tuscaloosa, hosting Ole Miss, and then going to Athens was not going to be fun for the Commodores. But you look at that middle game against Ole Miss. You were leading at halftime, and I don't think anybody in the nation, maybe even the Commodores themselves, expected to be leading at halftime. So that shows you a lot about what this team is capable of. I look more at that than looking at the just never being in the game against Georgia and Alabama, because that's what we expected just at this point in this team's development, if we're being realistic, especially with a young quarterback, a young coach. This is what we expected out of the Commodores. But to be leading at halftime against a team who has been dominant in a lot of FBS games this year is a huge stepping stone and shows you what this team can do in the future. And I do think it was significant that it was at home. It's tough to play on the road in tough environments. And once Vanderbilt starts getting that true home field advantage, feeling comfortable playing at home and getting the fans to come out and support them to really make it a true home game like we've seen in Tuscaloosa, like we've seen in Athens, like we've seen in Knoxville, I think this team could start turning the corner.
I agree with you completely. I mean, that Ole Miss game was really exciting. I was in the press box for that one, and everyone could not believe it. This was happening at halftime, but they were leading. They had multiple scoring drives. A long drive that I think took like 8 minutes, 54 seconds off the clock, and they scored like one of the most impressive drives of the season, right? So, that's something that you can sort of take moving forward, and to be able to say, you know what, this is when we're at our potential, if we can play like this, we can hang with the best teams in the country, right? And that's where they want to be, maybe not right now, but that's where they want to be in the future, right? So, that was definitely an exciting thing. But like you said, those 2 games, I think you almost have to discard them against Alabama and Georgia. You're not going to win those games. No one expected that. There are very few teams that can beat those 2 teams right now. So I think it's something you can learn from. But so lastly, let's discuss Vandy's tilt with Mizzou. The Commodores, although they have a tough test, finally have a winnable game on their SEC schedule. So in your view, what are the keys to victory in this one?
Yeah, well, Bobby, if the Commodores are going to win a game in the SEC, I think it has to be this weekend in Columbia, Missouri. There are a couple keys to this game, and the first is get the run game going. Obviously, Vanderbilt couldn't do that last week, but if they can get going on the ground, they do have a legitimate shot in this game. The problem is Missouri's front 4 has been really good. They've only surrendered an 100-yard rushing game once this season. That was early in the season to Kansas State, I believe. Since then, they haven't. But last week, 2 weeks ago, they had a bye last week. 2 weeks ago, they played Florida. Didn't surrender an individual 100-yard rusher, but were gashed. Worst rushing defense of their season so far. 236 yards surrendered to the Gators and ended up losing that game. So I'm looking at Vanderbilt to get the run game going. The other thing I'm looking at is Missouri is one of only 3 teams in Power 5 conferences to draw 6 or more penalties a game. The other 2 teams, both in the SEC, Alabama and Tennessee. Obviously, Missouri doesn't have the offensive firepower like in Alabama or Tennessee, so can't afford those kind of penalties. So if the Commodores can force the issue early and cause Missouri to draw more penalties and continue that streak, I think they'll have a chance to win in this game.
I think those are great points, and I think that also parlays into them needing to come out strong, right? If Vanderbilt's on the attack right away, if Vanderbilt is pushing the envelope, pushing the issue, maybe getting an early score, right, that gets Missouri back on their heels. So, I think and that starts with AJ Swan, right? He needs to come out, continue to be consistent, make good decisions like he has, and establish the running game. Raymond Davis needs to have a strong game, especially in a backfield now that's limited with recent players leaving the program. And Shepard and McGowan need to see, I think, 7+ targets each to have a shot in this one. And defense has to force turnovers, right? We've only had 3 interceptions all year after having 15+ last year. I think that's good for like 98th in the country. So those are sort of the keys that I see, and I definitely agree with the keys that you had said.
Yeah, and the other thing to look at on the Missouri side is sophomore quarterback Brady Cook has been very streaky this season. He came out against Florida and completed 8 of 8 passes to 5 different receivers and was off to a great start. But on his 9th pass of the game, he was throwing a slant across the middle. It was intercepted. He was never the same quarterback, threw another interception later in the game. So when Brady Cook gets going and he's on a streak and he's not facing adversity as a young quarterback, he can fly and could make this game ugly quick. If Vanderbilt can force an early turnover, like you're saying, and this defense could force an issue, then Brady Cook will be off his game probably, and we've seen that he's liable. Once he makes mistakes, the floodgates can open and Vanderbilt could have a good day in Columbia.
And speaking of hopefully having some more good days, Vanderbilt has 5 games left on their schedule. So what is a reasonable expectation for this team to finish out the season in your view?
Yeah, I think it's win this weekend and then you won't win again. The rest of the schedule after this weekend is South Carolina, Kentucky, Florida, and Tennessee. Throw out Kentucky and Tennessee. I'm sorry, I don't think you're winning either of those games, especially not Tennessee. Totally forget about that game. Florida at home, probably not going to win. They're a team that has had some struggles lately, but I don't think Vanderbilt's at the place to really beat a team like that yet. And I guess the other game that people are talking about potentially winning is South Carolina, as Spencer Rattler and co. has shown some struggles as the season has gone on, but I still don't think the Commodores, at this point in their development, are at a place to beat a team like the Gamecocks.
Yeah, I have written here 2-3, but I think that's a little too optimistic, and I think you just sold me on that. I don't. Mizzou really does represent their best chance to win. But Missouri, this is a team that hung with Georgia, and they had a really good game for them. So. Not saying that Missouri will put on that performance again, but Vanderbilt definitely is going to have to be on their A game to beat them. South Carolina, like you said, I don't think I see a win there. That's the one I've sort of been talking myself through this whole season of maybe they could win that one. Spencer Rattler's having a bad day, but I don't know at this point. And then the rest of the 3, you're not going to beat Kentucky. Florida, they're going to be itching for a win, especially late in the season. At that point, they might be trying to get, who knows, maybe they'll be trying to get bowl eligible at that point.
Probably, yeah.
And then Tennessee, they're going to be hungry, especially if they come off and they have beaten Georgia. They want that college football playoff, so they're not going to lay down easy at all. So I agree with you. I think 1-4 is probably on the horizon. So now over to the pitch, where Vanderbilt soccer finally got into the win column, beating number 24 South Carolina, their first victory since September 25th against Mizzou. In between these victories, Vanderbilt had draws with Georgia and Auburn, lost to number 2 Arkansas, and lost Rachel Dureski to a season-ending injury. So was this tough stretch a real means for concern for this team, or something they will quickly put in the rearview mirror?
Yeah, I'm going to go with the rearview mirror. I think this team has looked great. And, we were just talking about whenever we had our last show 2 weeks ago about how great this team rebounded from the LSU loss. And I think the same things are at play. They're really strong defensively, right? And I think that's how this team is built, on a really good culture, really good coach, and they're really strong defensively. The other thing I'm looking about, and we talked about this last episode, is that Vanderbilt was scoring on an unusually high amount of shots. They were taking some of the least shots in the SEC, yet scoring the most, which we said is not sustainable, and it showed in some of these games. But even in the draw to Auburn, they outshot them 12-9. So we're starting to see positive indicators in the statistics column, even if it isn't the win, and then finally beating South Carolina, a ranked team, which is not easy to beat. They got that win. So I think it's a sign of brighter skies going forward for the Commodores.
I would agree. They're like we said before many times. Darren Ambrose has his team ready. They are a team that is experienced, and even after all of this, they're still second in the SEC East, right behind Tennessee. They're only 2 division points behind them. So everything is still within reach for them, right? And against Arkansas, the number 9 team in the country, you get down 2-0 in the first 5 minutes. I think they scored in the second and the third minutes. That's kind of a gut punch, right? Very hard to respond. And then Arkansas gets another one right as the second half starts. So I think that's just a tough game. So I almost kind of disregard that. And Arkansas is, top 10 team anyway right now. But I think really, you outshot, against UGA, but you scored in the 3rd minute, you conceded in the 15th minute, but to score early is huge, and then especially after facing Auburn where you're scoring in the 89th minute to salvage a point. So, I think this team shows us they can do it in a variety of ways, and I'm not too concerned with them going forward, and I'm excited to see how they progress the rest of the season. But the rest of the season might hinge a little bit on this. So the Vanderbilt soccer lost Rachel Dureski to a season-ending injury. So what does this loss mean to the team, and how will they survive without her?
Yeah, I mean, Dureski is just a huge part of this team, both on the field and off. On the field, 5 goals, 3 assists in her season. It was unfortunately cut short. But, the other thing I look at is just she was such a big boost whenever she was on the field to this team. Really just seemed like one of the pushers of culture, one of the players that you watch and you always believe you have a chance in the game because Dureski is on the field. Now, does that change? I've seen a lot of fight out of this team even without her. I think it's a big blow, and I think we've seen lesser teams crumble in the past after losing one of their star players. But I think, again, it goes back to the construction of this team and the philosophy that they've all bought into about kind of the next player up mentality. And again, I'm not sounding the alarms on this. I think it's a huge loss for them going forward. Obviously, I like the Commodores' chances with Dureski more than without Dureski. But I think this team, the way they're constructed and the mindset they have, I think they can survive going forward.
Definitely, I agree with you, and I Alex Kerr and Ella Schamberger are both going to step up, and I think in her absence, and as the defense will have quote unquote less to defend against, but she wasn't super, she didn't play super many minutes this year. She had I think in the low top 10 of minutes played, so she's a huge factor, but there's other players that have also had that experience and have played a lot of minutes, so I think that they'll be able to hopefully survive this and then keep moving forward. So. Vanderbilt soccer next plays against Florida tomorrow night. We will have all of that action covered for you on VU Sports Wired, and that'll do it for this week's show. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.